Instagram. Okay. YouTube, we are good. Instagram. Instagram, we are also good. We're in. Let's see if we can go live. Oh, that's interesting. I do not like how Instagram looks. It like completely cut us off.
Oh,
That I don't like that. It's like down the middle. Let me
huh.
see. I don't know if you can see that. That does not look good.
I don't see anything on my end just as of yet.
It's all good. Let me add you. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how to flip that. That's unfortunate. All right. That's all good. Let's see if I can flip it on my end. Hmm. That's unfortunate. It's like I don't know if you can see it on my live, but it's like it like split us down the middle.
I
All right.
don't StreamYard you change like
Oh, you can
you're
change
able
it
to go in and you change your
how you
thing
want it.
ahead of time. So you
Mm,
could change your format, but
it's okay. That's
sometimes
fine.
yeah,
That's
it's all
fine.
good.
I'll just end the Instagram. It's not a big deal. Send that live.
Cool.
All right. Let's just jump into it. All right. Welcome to the Volleyball Coach Podcast. I'm your host, Alejandro de Mendoza. I'm a club director, coach, and someone who's passionate about helping players, coaches, and parents grow in the game we all love. Each week, we break down training, mindset, and performance strategies with some of the best athletes, coaches, and experts in volleyball. The goal is simple to give you tools, stories, and insights you can use right away, whether you're competing as a player, leading as a coach, or supporting as a parent. Today, I'm excited to be joined by the one and only Kara Hill. Kara Hill is the CEO of V-Ball Recruiter. She has over 15 years of experience helping thousands, I said thousands, of athletes get to play volleyball at the next level. She is a good friend of mine, someone I've known over the years, and I'm so stoked to have her here with us. Thank you for being with us, Kara.
Thank you. I hope I can live up to the hype. That was amazing.
No, you definitely live up to the hype. For all of those who are listening or watching, if you ever go to a qualifier for volleyball, you can always see her because she's always wearing her red hat. It is iconic at this point.
It's my trademark.
It
Yeah.
is it's absolutely no. Seriously, I every time I'm any of those tournaments, it's always pretty easy to find you where you're at.
Well, that's the reason I chose the red hat, you know. I never wanted to look like a coach. I never was a coach, and so I wanted to do something different that was stylish, that fit me. And originally I wore a lot of different hats, but the red hat kind of stuck, and so I've embraced it. And I always look like I'm going to a funeral. I pretty much always wear black, so red and black coordinate beautifully.
No, you can never go with the red and black. That's my volleyball club's colors, red and black. You can they stand out. It looks really great.
Yeah.
So how'd you get into just the whole recruiting space?
So I played volleyball. I played in high school. I played middle school. Played club and was competitive. I was recruited. Unfortunately, my freshman year in high school, there's a story, unfortunately, that goes with this. And so, my freshman year in high school was molested and assaulted actually by my teammate's dad, and it put a big dent in things. Over the next couple years, I was dealing with court cases and a lot of different challenges that just come from being a survivor. And so I didn't end up, I got recruited to play at Long Island University in Brooklyn, New York. I wanted to go 3,000 miles away. I'm originally from Southern California, and so one of my best friends and I both we were recruited together, and we were going to go together. And I didn't go. I wasn't in the mindset. I wasn't in the space that I felt like I could make a commitment to a team without being a distraction. The legal stuff was still not complete at that time. And so I didn't go. Went through a process of healing and did a lot of different things, and eventually reconnected with an old volleyball coach on Facebook. Um, his name was Chuck Koulapali. He passed away just a few years ago. But Chuck had reconnected with me and had invited me to a tournament. And I walked into the gym, and I'll never forget, it just was like so magical. I missed the squeaky shoes and the smelly knee pads and the whistles blowing and the families, celebrating and being excited to be there. And I just missed it. He was coaching an 18-2s team at the time, and some of the girls on the team were still going through the recruiting process. He had some juniors on the team, and they were asking him questions about whether he had followed up with certain people, different college coaches that they were talking to. And in that moment, the light bulb went off. I was in a major transition. I wanted to do something different. And I just knew in that moment, there's something here. There's something here. So I actually was supposed to pursue a career path in real estate. And in that moment, I walked out the gym. I called an old teammate of mine and shared with her, hey, I think I want to do this. Like, what do you think? Would you have paid for help with recruiting? And she's like, oh my God, are you kidding? Do you remember how lost we were? And, we kind of laughed and chuckled. But that week I called over 100 college coaches and asked questions. And I'll never forget, connected with Diane Short, who was the head coach at Brown University at the time. And she had become a friend throughout the years. I shared this story with her much, much later in my career, but she was so sweet and kind and took the time to really chat about Ivy League recruiting and, what they wanted to see. And that's essentially what launched my career. So. Yeah.
No, that's awesome. I love how, even though what you've been through, you still came back to the sport. You still had that love of the sport, which I think for not everyone would, that being able to experience that and go through that. And I think that shows a lot about your strength and your character to, still come back to sport and to come back in a way where you help others now, right? You help others get to the level that you wish you went to. And I think that's absolutely awesome. So
Yeah.
obviously the topic we're going to be talking about is recruiting. Right? What does that look like? What are some mistakes that players, coaches, and parents just need to know about, and maybe we can help some people avoid some common pitfalls. So obviously, we got to talk about the players. What's the biggest mistake players make when starting the recruiting process?
Ooh, biggest mistakes. Well, there's actually quite a few mistakes that people make when they start the process. The first is, I think that creating that generic introduction. A lot of times, when you're Googling or you're researching and you're trying to figure out the best approach to introduce yourself to a college coach, you see a lot of templates that are out there. And it's like, hi, coach, my name is Kara Hill. I'm an outside hitter in the class of, 2015 or whatever the recruiting class is, right? And I just feel that generic intro just puts you in the mix with everyone else that's going through the recruiting process, and you need to be different. There are 500,000 girls playing volleyball in the US alone. So if you want to stand out, I get that question a lot. How do I stand out? Well, stand out by starting, in a unique way. Don't introduce yourself like everyone else. So I actually spend quite a bit of time with our athletes, helping to write emails and do it in a way that is powerful, that evokes emotion, that creates that connection with the coach. Coaches are recruiting people. And I think sometimes we just want to think about checking off the boxes. Oh, I sent my emails. I did it. Well, if you want to stand out, if you want to be unique, if you want coaches to really feel like they're getting to know you, then you need to put a lot more effort in how you present yourself and how you market yourself. Second biggest mistake is that they start with really, I'm all about aim high. Okay. I fully believe that you don't know what you're capable of without, really going after it. But when you go through this recruiting process, and especially with the transfer portal, and there's a lot of really, really interesting things that are happening, a lot of interesting dynamics that are happening right now in the space with college coaches and NIL and the transfer portal. There's a lot of very interesting things that'll happen. And
Interesting is
so
putting it lightly. It's
it's
crazy out there.
it is very crazy. But getting an athletic evaluation and knowing, where can you play? Who should you be targeting? Because if you're reaching out, to Nebraska and you're emailing Jalen, the recruiting coordinator, and you're messaging and you're messaging and you don't move the needle or don't help Nebraska, it doesn't matter how creative your approach is, right? If you can't play there, if you can't compete in that conference, then it's not really going to go anywhere. And so the putting effort into your emails is important, but starting with an assessment and knowing, what athletic conferences you should really be targeting is also just extraordinarily important. So you're not spinning your wheels and wasting time, energy, and resources going to camps, and putting all this effort into messages that, the coach isn't going to be interested.
Yeah, no, I can't imagine that. Yeah, that takes I think a type of player who really knows themselves, and some of them might have no idea because there's just so many colleges out there, and being able to see yourself at that university I think is so huge. And like, am I the type of player that they're trying to recruit, right?
Yeah, so as a service, that's something that we do where we'll meet with them. We do a consult, we do an athletic evaluation, and we sketch out the target conferences based on what they want to study. Who's going to support. Sometimes, student athletes say things like, "I want to pursue nursing." Well, nursing and college volleyball are very complicated. You can't do that everywhere. There's a lot of college coaches that, you know, the nursing department does not support college athletics for the most part across most college campuses. You have to meet so much criteria in order for you to go off in the real world. And the complications really begin your junior year when clinicals begin. And so
No,
knowing
absolutely.
these kinds of things, like having that insight is important. And so we typically start with an assessment, and then we kind of zero in and hone in on schools and target conferences where they can not only play, but that are also going to be realistic with what they want to study.
No, absolutely. I think I had when I was in college, there were a couple girls on the girls team who wanted to be doctors. They are doctors now. There was two of them I can think of. They were bio majors, and man, the labs they had to take, the time, all these classes were 4 hour labs plus volleyball. It was their schedule was so filled, and it was obviously it worked out for them. They're both doctors now, but the time they had to put in juggling both it's not for everyone. And I don't think people realize that until they're in that situation and they realize how much they have to sacrifice to have both.
100%.
So like I think one of the things you talk about the emails, one of the things that I know a lot of players like to do, especially you help them with social media, they put up their highlight videos, like, so like comparing like the quality of highlight videos versus actual game performance. Like which one's more important? How important is it?
So are you saying, I want to make sure I understand your question.
Yeah, so
When it
like
comes to film, yeah, tell me.
yeah, so like when it comes to film, like I feel like some people like putting to get like sending full game film, and then some like to put just like the highlights. Like which one's a
Yeah.
little bit? Do you feel like you put a little bit more importance on like the actual just, hey, find a match where you played really really good beginning as the best you can beginning to end of that set, or just like, hey, just put together your best moments and put it in a little like 2 3 minute video.
Yeah, those are great questions. Certainly, every college coach has their preference. They'll all, I would say, at the beginning and the beginning of your journey, Giving somebody highlights and having them be able, if you're a pin, being able to see you take those first couple of swings is really going to tell them whether or not they feel like you're somebody that they want to continue to watch film or put on the board and for them to show more interest in. I would say, just out of respect for, the college coach's time, it's best to start with highlights. And they, at some point, may request that they want unedited film. The coaches oftentimes that are requesting unedited footage are going to be in programs where maybe the recruiting budget isn't as strong, it's not as large, and they can't necessarily make the investment to go watch you live, especially if you're coming from another state or another part of the country. And so that's when I find that you'll have more of those coaches that will request unedited film because they want to try and get a real picture, a real idea of who you are. I think during COVID, so many coaches really kind of got burned during COVID when everything was so film related. And so a lot of them prefer live assessments. And, some college coaches, I don't know that I should say her name specifically, but I can think of a program specifically where the coach is very, very direct, which I can appreciate, but she's very direct, and she'll just tell an athlete, hey, you look like a good kid, look like you could play, but I'm not going to see you play live, and so I'm just going to remove you from my list, and don't bother messaging. Like it's not going to happen here. Because they want to make sure that they can see that live assessment. And so I think that's where camps become really a crucial part of your process too.
Yeah. Would you say that that most coaches like to see players live, like when they go out to qualifiers versus just the film? You think that's where the main preference is right now?
100%. If they have the opportunity to catch you live, they're going to want to wait to make a decision, having seen you play live. That's always going to be the preference. Have they ever been backed in a corner where another program is offering and there's a deadline on the table and the kid really wants to come there and they present themselves well on campus? Like, am I going to tell you that there isn't any other way? No. Recruiting is definitely not black and white. But for the most part, I would say the majority of coaches are going to say, we want an opportunity to watch you live, see how you interact with your coaches, with your teammates, with your parents. And more, college coaches want to observe your parents courtside and the interactions and what they're doing and how they behave and conduct themselves courtside. It matters more to some over others. But I can think of a player right now who committed to a P4 program. She was one of the top players in the country. I don't want to share the position, but one of the top players in the country, has done some really big things. Her resume is, what any child would dream of in terms of, playing on the national training, doing NTDP, being on the roster. And there were coaches that said no because of a parent.
Yeah. You never know who's watching. Right? Those little interactions.
Yeah, never. So in the hotel rooms, like walking around, like, you're always, Coach Sam, who works with me, she'll always say, to our clients and to families, hey, you're always on a stage. And so you need to make sure that you represent yourself that way.
No, absolutely. I think that's such a huge message that, obviously what you're doing on the court, you can't deny how important that is. But again, you said it so perfectly. They're also recruiting you as a person. Mm-hmm. These coaches want to know, like, are you going to fit their culture, right? Are you going to improve upon the culture and the standards that they've created at their university? Are you going to be improving it or are you going to be hurting it, right? And no matter how good you are on the court, if they see you as maybe as a liability or like, oh man, I don't know if she's going to fit with our group of girls, like that's tough, and I don't think enough athletes think about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and again, when I talk about spending time on your emails. When you think about how recruiting has changed, and especially in that top 1%, when you're talking about players that are some of the top players, who are getting offers and getting deadlines beginning June 15th. So first time you're talking to a coach, and some college coaches are giving you, a couple hours to 24 hours to make a decision beginning June 15th. So wrap your head around that. You might be getting a couple hours to 24 hours. Some coaches might give you up to a week. There's some crazy deadlines and demands that are being made of these athletes who, you know, would have only been able to talk to the coach essentially for that first day. And so a lot of times, I think families make the mistake of waiting too late to get started, and they think, oh, well, we have time. They can't talk to us anyway. Boy, is that not the right way to go,
Yeah.
because your kid's not prepared these coaches mean business when they want to talk to you on June 15th. So if you're a
Yeah.
D1 kid, wow. And even this year, Sam and I just talked about this. I've seen more Division 2 and Division 3 coaches get more aggressive with offers beginning this first summer. And that's been really different. That's kind of a newer trend that we're seeing, where some of these programs are being a lot more aggressive with putting offers out even before some of them can really do like a formal, pre-read on a player. They're extending offers. And so there's a lot of really interesting things that are happening in college recruiting right now.
When would you say like athletes just start reaching out to coaches, and like what should those messages look like when they first start reaching out?
That's a great question. So depending on the talent level, there's some kids that I would say that really need to begin by their eighth grade club season. So if you're in 14s, that's for a pretty special athlete. If you are playing at the open level, you're an impact player, people are starting to pay attention. You're crazy not to start in that 14s year. And the reason that I say that is because that summer, your summers now become so important with college camps. And it's in your best interest to get to, 3, 4, 5 college camps a summer. And some people are going to be like, oh my gosh, like the investment, the expense, if they're invited, do they have to pay? Yes, unfortunately, you have to pay. This is an expensive sport. And I don't see that changing. And so, you're doing a disservice if you don't take the time to get on college campuses, go to camps and start working with these coaches to kind of get a feel, right, of their coaching style and what the expectations are, and just putting your athlete in a position where they can start getting comfortable playing in these uncomfortable situations, because you go to a camp and it's different. And so learning how to walk into that environment and not being the best, they're certainly not going to be the best at that age walking in the door. But it really sets your child up for, the success in the long run of the recruiting game. So if you are, a D1, recruit, starting eighth grade is pretty important these days, because your high school and summer, oftentimes they overlap with club and high school ball. And so there's only so much time that you can, get these opportunities to go. If you're part of the NTD training program, which, by the way, there are some top kids in the country that don't get that invite to go to USAV to do the NTDP training program. And so if you're not that kid that's not going to the NTDP program, the advantage of that for top recruits is the exposure, the opportunity to work with a lot of these college coaches from high level D1 programs that are there, that are, helping to run the the national training program, right? So that's the advantage for the coaches, because they can start building a rapport and a relationship for some of these players. So some of them get that early exposure. But yeah, you gotta get started at a young age, in my opinion. Especially when you're a D1 recruit, I think you're crazy not to. I think you put yourself at a disadvantage when you don't.
Yeah, I think laying it out early and just getting that groundwork done is super important. Like I know someone who works with you that just this past summer who went to all over the country to go to those camps and just to get that yeah, just getting to know the campus, the coaches. Can they see themselves there? And it goes back to what you were talking about before, how much these coaches want to see these players live before they give an offer out. Like that's, I think it's so important that a great way to get in front of them. If they couldn't see you in club at a qualifier, you just show up at their campus, right? You go to their camp, and you're going to be right in front of them to show what you got.
That and the other thing, there's some clubs that host college coaching camps. They all happen at the same time, really in June. There are some that do just an absolute phenomenal job. Some I'm not as big of a fan of. TAV does probably the best job at these college coaching camps for that, higher level D1 kid. What I love about it, everybody's welcome. There's no politics at this camp. And sometimes when you go to different college camps, when you go to the clubs and you go to different college camps, you don't always know everybody. Athletes are separated, or the top kids go off to a couple of courts, they get, their special treatment. But it's not like that at TAV's camp, man. You're thrown in, and it is high level volleyball. All the kids on the top team, it's mandatory for them to be at that camp. It is high level volleyball, and there are 40, 50 college coaches that are in the gym, and they're the OGs. They really started these college coaching camps. It was John Sample that actually started all of this many years ago, and it's grown and evolved, and they do a tremendous job. So as a parent, when you're looking for the best bang for your buck, when you're trying to figure out, how can I stretch my dollar, where can I go? There are some clubs that do a phenomenal job. Sunshine has an absolute fabulous high academic college camp. And I forever, tell my kids, and it sells out. You've got to sign up. You've got to be on the wait list. You've got to be ready to hit purchase the second it comes through. But Carrie Klein does a phenomenal job and puts so much effort, and that high academic camp is run so well. Some of them around the country that are now being hosted are not done as well. SG Elite is another one that does a phenomenal high academic camp. In fact, they have one coming up. It's a D3 camp. Trent does a great job. And SG Elite, that's another one where they have a great D3 high academic camp that they do in the fall, and then they do another one later in the summer. T Street, another one, does an amazing job. Tribe is another one. We're a big fan of Tribe's college coaching camp. I send a lot of kids to the camps that I know are going to be a phenomenal experience for the family, where the investment is worthwhile, and where I can feel confident, if I'm going to make that recommendation, that you're going to be treated well when you go. Yeah. But those camps are, especially when you're young, you're able to actually interact, and the coaches run the courts. It's really such a cool experience. I'm loving them, and they happen every summer. They really begin usually like the first week of June.
No, yeah, you're right. And people really travel to that. I think like a year or two ago, I actually worked over the summer with some Canadians who came down, and they were come down to the Sunshine Camp and the T Street Camp for this high academics, and for them, recruiting is really tough, and it's a little bit different up in Canada, but they want to come to play a university ball down here, and dude, they're in 8th grade. Like, just speaks to what you were talking about before. Like, if you're really serious about it and you're one of that, you consider yourself a part of that group that should be playing at that level, then you got to start early. You got to start at U14s, right? Going into U15s. I think that's a great time for them to start putting themselves in front of coaches. And I think these college recruiting camps are awesome. Like you said, 40, 50 coaches all in one place, and you have an opportunity to be doing drills that they're running, and they can watch you compete and play, and they have a list of all the athletes who are there. And I think that's absolutely massive.
Yeah, for sure.
So what do you think in general, obviously I'm talking in a generality, what separates athletes who get noticed from those who don't?
Ooh, there's a lot. You know, as an attacker, your presence, it really depends on the position. Wow,
We can go
this is a
position
tough
by
one.
position. We can do it that way. I love that. Like, yeah, we can go position. Let's you start with, let's say, an outside.
Well, I would say this. I would say this. You know, when you're playing at a top club and you're playing an open and you're an impact player, whether you know you're a setter who's even if you're running a 6-2, if you're playing on a high level team where you're getting exposure, you're playing in the open level, exposure is going to be there. Now, just because you're playing on those teams, I think athletes make the sometimes athletes, sometimes parents will make the assumption that because they're playing at that level, the exposure's there, they don't necessarily have to do as much.
They think that's enough.
And
Just,
they
hey, I'm
think
on
it's
this
enough.
open level team. Bam, there goes. That is my whole recruiting strategy. Just being on this team.
Yeah, and I think for some parents too that might have experience in like football recruiting or basketball recruit, every sport is so different. We all have our own niches with how recruiting works. And so, to get yourself out there, having a social presence is a big part of this, especially if you're playing in a program that is on the smaller side. If you're playing at a smaller club, if you're not necessarily getting that opportunity to play as much in open, investing the time and effort and building your personal brand on social can be impactful, and that will help with creating more visibility and exposure. Um, you know, you got to be good. I mean, that's really the bottom line. And I think for sometimes people think their kids are better than they are. And that's really hard on some families to really, to accept. We spend so much time and effort and money. These parents are taking time away from work and they're traveling all over the country, and you're sacrificing so much for your kid to play this sport that we all love. But it really becomes emotional for everyone when you go through this recruiting process and you're looking for more exposure, and you're always trying to find a way to give your kid, the upper hand, right? And you it really depends. Some people are just blessed with athleticism. Some kids don't play in open and are phenomenal athletes that go on to play in big time programs, and they didn't get to do the USAV NTDP program, and they didn't. So part of it is a talent thing. One of the things that we really do, one of the things that I really pride myself in doing is we take the time, we put out a form that essentially says get on our radar. And we go through and we have discovered quite a few kids over the years that we've helped, not only get recruited, but have gone on to play and have successful careers. But I have this program. We create this forum because we want to get to know our fan base. We want to learn more about athletes as a whole that are in the sport and in the space. And obviously, if you're playing an open, more than likely, my husband, myself, or our team. That's another thing that people don't quite understand is, everything falls under the red hat and it falls under Volleyball recruiter, and people think that I do everything. I have a staff. We have 10 people.
What, Gary? You don't do everything yourself?
No, I don't. In fact, there was something in the Volleyball Moms Facebook group this past week that how does she put together these lists? Well, I have a staff. we have people, and we coordinate with club coaches and directors. We connect. My husband talks to a bunch of people. Every week we're talking. We're always trying to find somebody that we can feature, somebody new, somebody that's flying under the radar. So for us, we're always looking for those kids, right? Because you want to, it's really, really special when you find someone and you're able to create a story or do something fun. But yeah, your talent is a big part of that. As an attacker, when you can jump, when you're touching over 10 feet, uh, you're gonna get some attention. You got to prove it though. You
Yeah,
got to
you
prove
always
it.
see the clubs posting about like, oh, guess who just got into the 10-foot club.
Yeah, Kari Knott's is like 10-8 or 10-9 or something. It's like ridiculous,
Oh, is
you
that
know.
the from A5?
A5. Yeah,
Oh man,
yeah.
dude,
She's
dude,
playing on Gabe's team this year. The
oh
lovely
man,
girl.
Tucky, you just talk about Instagram, TikTok, and Instagram sensation. I've seen those videos so much. That's insane. That's just God given. That's just like insane athleticism.
Yeah, yeah. But, for families that are looking at, the Stanfords of the world, and they're looking at the Penn States of the world, and you know, they need players that can come into their program and compete and can score in those conferences. And so you got to be realistic about really where your kid's at. And that makes a huge difference in this journey when you can when you have an assessment and you can really figure out where your kid's at.
Yeah, and even if these coaches maybe in the recruiting class can't find it, you know what they're going to do? Transfer portal.
Yeah.
Dude, dude, transfer portal is crazy. Like that's I'm seeing that a lot. Just how a lot more colleges are, especially we're talking about the top schools. They're gonna first look at the transfer portal. Why? Because those kids already have stats in college. They've already been playing against other girls at their level, and it's wild west right now with the transfer portal. It's definitely, in
Yeah.
my opinion, really changed some of the recruiting landscape for a lot of kids.
It definitely has. There's a coach that I'm good friends with at a P4 program. He had really had shared, this was somebody that if I had somebody that had raw talent 5 years ago, I would call him and say, hey, I got a kid and I think she's going to be pretty special, but she needs somebody that is going to invest in her. And I think you should, I think you should take a real hard look at this kid and see what you think. And I have sent him kids over the years where we've had these conversations and no more. And part of that, the roster limitations are very
Yes.
challenging. Penn State used to have 5, 6, 7, six, I want to say 6 ball control players on the roster at any given time. And now, with only having 18, some of the kids are grandfathered in, but, with them only getting 18, 3 are going to be ball control players. More than likely, you're going to have about 3 setters, and then the rest are going to be made up of pins and middles.
Yeah.
And so, using the transfer portal to bring somebody in, that, like to your point, that has stats is something that a lot of them are relying on. They're saying if we don't get who we want
Yeah.
after we go through the recruiting cycle and we make offers and we don't get who we want, then we're going to sit and we're going to hold on to our money and we'll go in the portal.
Yeah, and it's not even just volleyball, but basketball too. And it's the like really good example is the one you just did, where it's like, hey, I have this, she's raw, she needs a little bit of love and training. Now it's like she's now going to go to a mid major, maybe get that training and development, and then here comes Penn State, Texas. Swoop. Hey man, thanks for training this kid up for me for the last couple of years. Let me just get that final product you put all that hard time and work in, and yep, I appreciate it. So like even if you're not the top man, that's tough. But that's just it. That's what some of these mid majors now have to deal with, that they're going to put time and effort into these diamonds in the roughs, and they're going to polish them up, and then all of a sudden they develop into who you hope they could, and here comes this big school and just come up and grab
Well,
them.
so some have a very negative thought to that and are feeling very burned right now. If you talk to coaches, they're feeling very burned, very distrusting. Um, and there's been some negativity around that. There are some coaches that are looking at it with a different mindset, that are like negotiating and talking to some of the big time programs to say, hey, why don't you let me take that kid? I know you're talking to her. We've offered. right? Why don't we take that kid? We'll do everything that we can. And then, when she's ready and she can come play for you, then we'll, support the transfer, and we'll tell her it's time to go, or, we're your stopping point to develop you. So some of that is going on. Some coaches
Absolutely.
have embraced it. Other coaches are feeling very burned. And, the challenging thing when you look at it from the college coach's perspective is their livelihood is on the line. And sometimes I think that's missing, the lack of empathy in the sport for the college coaches that are in these positions. And it's not just the college coach that's affected and impacted, it's their family. Many of these people are married and they have children at home. And think about if your husband or wife lost their job and now you're going to pick up your family, because this is the love and the passion that you fell in love with, and now you're going to make this sacrifice and you're going to move across the country and you're going to have to go someplace else. I mean, it impacts a lot of lives and their livelihood. If they're not winning, and at a lot of programs, your AD is going to look elsewhere, and
Yeah.
here's the door.
And it's not just the head coaches, it's also the staff, the assistants. They got families too, you know? And most coaches, when they get hired, they already have their staff put together, right? They're coming in with a brand new staff, and that's college sports, NIL, transfer portal, man. It's a lot different than just 10 years ago, really. It's evolving, and I'm very curious, and I don't know, really hopeful to see what the future of college sports is. So, as far as like the coaches side of this, we're talking about like high school and club coaches, and their role in helping their athletes get recruited. What role should these high school and club coaches play in recruiting?
So I think the big thing, in the club world, when you're out and about and you're watching, really studying and seeing where athletes end up and thinking back as a coach in your career, who you've coached, who you've been with. One thing that I tell players all the time, if they can't make the investment in our program, for example, or if we don't take them on, I don't always offer my contract to everybody that we meet with. And so if we can't take somebody on because we don't have the space, for example, I will tell a player, hey, I want you to go and I want you to talk to your club coach, and I want you to ask them who you remind them of and where they went off to play. And as a coach, if you can kind of think back and think about your present kids, and then think about those kids that you've coached in the past and where they've gone off to play, and start to recognize some of the patterns and the athleticism, and paying attention, I think, to all divisions. It's so easy for us to sit and watch Division I volleyball on the screen, going and getting in the gym and actually watching college volleyball at every level and really becoming familiar with all the various levels, I think, is important. And being realistic with the athletes, to say like, hey, these are the types of conferences that you need to play for. This is where you're going to be able to make an impact. These are the types of programs that are going to show interest, because so much of the process is getting the evaluation right. And I think that's missing for a lot of people, is the assessment. And so you'll hear me say that over and over again. They need to know where they can play so that they can ultimately be successful. And then they can ultimately come to the club and say, hey, these are programs that I'm talking to. Would you mind calling and following up? Or, hey, I got this invite to camp, and this is a school that I've been communicating with and I'm genuinely interested in. Would you mind giving them a ring and kind of finding out, am I in the mix here? Are they genuinely interested? So I think offering yourself to reach out to coaches, it's a relationship game. But I think, offering to reach out to some of these college coaches and try and get some insight to be able to best advocate for your player is important. But being realistic, do some homework on that program before you pick up the phone and call the coach, so that, you have a sense of the level that they can play at. And by the way, Division III programs, there's some phenomenal D3 programs that could actually beat quite a few Division I programs or compete with them. And so just because somebody is Division III I think sometimes club coaches want to say, oh, you should be focusing on D2 programs. Well, you look at a D2 program like a Tampa or a West Florida or Cal Poly Pomona. They got girls that can touch over 10 feet on that roster. They've got some really good volleyball players on that team. So that's why I'm saying, like, the conference, like, understanding where the kids can play is impactful in being able to best help them. And if you don't know, try and watch some film, try and watch some highlights ahead of time so that you know whether this kid's being realistic, um, because that's half the battle, is making
Yeah,
sure that you're not reaching out.
I
Yeah.
think that's so huge. Just understanding what those levels actually look like. And you made such a good point. Like, dude, there are some D2 programs that could easily be in the top 50 in D1. Like, there's
I
some,
don't know about in the top 50, but I would definitely say that could compete with like
there's
150.
some really good D2 programs out there. I think they do a
Yeah.
really good job, and they recruit some really really good kids. Maybe not in the top 50, but I definitely think they could be beating the bottom half
A
of
hundred
D1.
percent.
Right? It's definitely a much more competitive than people know, and I think you're right that a lot of people only usually be thinking about Division 1, and or especially some kids, like it's like D1 or bust, right? It's either, hey, I play D1, or else or I'm just going to go to college just to have fun. There's a lot of opportunities out there and some really good volleyball. What do you think would be some like common mistakes that you see coaches make when just trying to guide their athletes through this process?
Not asking enough questions about what it is that the athlete is really interested in their long term game. What is it that you want to do for a career if you know? And listen, these are teenagers. A lot of them are going to change their mind, right? And that's okay too. But what are their interests? Because when you hear things like nursing, health science, like any STEM related, field, hey, bringing things to their attention to really help them understand the sacrifice, right? And wanting to understand what they want in their future. I don't think that enough coaches, take the time. I've developed questionnaires actually for a lot of different clubs. I've helped a lot of different clubs set up recruiting in their clubs to be able to best support their athletes. And I always start with a recruiting questionnaire for the club coach so that they can, ask some of these questions and find out. It's very interesting when you ask a kid. You're in Southern California. I'm from Southern California. When you ask the kids from Southern California and they're playing at a SoCal club, what are the schools that interest you? And you ask them for their top 10 or top 20 schools. They have Stanford, USC, UCLA, Pepperdine, UC San Diego. They have like these, you know, high level Division 1 programs on their list. And you might be looking at this kid going, well, okay, honey, but you can't play any of these programs. So I love this, but we can talk about playing club volleyball, or we can talk about where you can play and where you can make an impact. And with what you want to study, let's talk about what's realistic. Because at the highest level in the Big Ten and a lot of those schools, you got to compete every practice. You got to show up. It is super hard to get a spot on the roster and then get on the floor, right? And then you're trying to keep your spot, and there's somebody always on your heels trying to take your spot. And so what happens for a lot of them is the pressure with the academic commitment and the pressure to try and keep their spot. Do I go to an extra workout and get some extra reps, or I need to go study for this exam because I've got a biology exam coming up or a chem exam coming up or whatever it is they're taking, right? It's like, to your point at the beginning of our conversation, right? It's a gnarly commitment. So
Yeah,
I
or
think for
even a
some of
social
them,
life.
yeah, social life. Holy cow. During the season, it's hard to have a social life during the season, but in the off season, some of these kids want to do, beach and indoor. And that's really hard. You're a varsity sport athlete year round. It's gnarly.
Yeah, the travel, the classes, yeah, the whole two sport now with beach and indoor. That's a lot. That's so much. It's a lot. It's a lot for a lot of these athletes to take on, and honestly, I think just taking having an off season, I think is so huge just for longevity, just so these kids can actually have a full career, you know. But
Mhm.
yeah, a lot to your point. It's a lot. You know, these kids are always going to be competing. The coaches are always going to be recruiting and trying to get great athletes. And if they recruited you, they also probably recruited other kids at your level. And so you got to be doing the little extra things, right? Making those decisions about, should I stay after to get extra reps? Should I show up a little bit early to get extra reps? Should I do that extra weight, that extra class? Like it's a lot.
It is a lot.
Yeah. So what should coaches be doing to, like, maybe what should coaches avoid doing when it comes to recruiting for club coaches? Like, what do you have any big no-nos?
Any big no-nos? Well, the first thing is, if the club coach has any influence on which qualifiers, which events their team can go to, I think it's a disservice if you don't know what your kids are looking for. If you
Mm,
have kids that are, the majority of your roster, let's say you've got, 6 to 8 kids that want to play at the collegiate level and, want to play in a top academic school, then NEQ or some of these events in the Northeast make a lot of sense for your club team, right? Because it allows those families to get to the East Coast, for the kids to kind of get a taste of what it would be in the Northeast, and for them to get exposure and be able to get seen by some of those programs. So that's where we start with that questionnaire, right? Is getting the questionnaire and trying to learn a little bit more about your players so that you have better insight on what it is that they're trying to do. How important is scholarship money? I would say there's a big disconnect. There are a lot of families that are in this sport that they're using volleyball as a leg up to a top academic school. They want an Ivy or an Ivy League type institution, and they're prepared to write a check for $100,000 a year for their kid to go to school. And that's important to the family. So I think when there's a disconnect and you don't know the goals, you don't want to push a school and a program on, one of your players if it's not the fit that they're looking for. I think the other thing is there's a push to get kids sometimes committed, and they haven't done enough homework and research to really know if this is the best fit for them. But they want to, they want this kid to be wrapped up and be done because it's one less kid that you have to worry about in the process. And some of this is generalities. I think
yeah.
everybody has the best intentions. I think anybody in this sport, we want to see these kids go off and pursue their dreams and play at the next level. But I think really getting to know and trying to have a better understanding of what the athlete and the family is looking for. And so, not just asking the player to do the questionnaire, but making sure that their parents have had some influence, because sometimes the kid doesn't know that their parents are prepared financially to send them to school, and they haven't had some of these conversations. And so they're great conversation starters as a whole. Um, but yeah, I would say those are some of the biggest mistakes that I see. Is we kind of get, we think about these qualifiers as a recruiting opportunity, but are you putting your athletes in the best position to be recruited in the programs that they can play at, and where they can be successful?
Yeah. No, I think a lot of it, I think whether it's the player side we talked previously about or the coaches side, it's a lot of it's just like awareness. For the players, the self-awareness, and for the coaches, the awareness of their athlete that they're coaching, right? Where do they belong? What do they want, right? Whether, they want a certain major, the school you're thinking of, do they even provide that major, right? Is that even an option for them? Or like, are they willing to go out of state? Or do they want to stay in state? Right? There's so many factors, and then also, like you said, scholarships, right? Not everyone's just handing out full rides. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, is this a school, if they didn't get a full scholarship, can they afford the rest? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because those out of state tuitions, man, they ain't cheap.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of factors, and I think you made a great point. Just the awareness, right, of what's in their best interest, what's the best interest for the athlete, for that family, right, and can they play at that level,
Mm-hmm.
right? So with kids and coaches, you cannot remove the parents, right? And I know all the parents cannot wait for this section of this conversation is, how can you support your athlete without overstepping, right? So just kicking this off, what role should parents play in the recruiting process?
Having composure and being calm and being supportive and helping to talk your kid off the ledge. A lot of what Coach Sam and I do when we work with athletes through the process is talk families off the ledge. They went in a different direction. They offered somebody else. Why isn't this happening? How come this isn't happening for her? She's working so hard. It's like, hey, calm down, relax. It's okay. Recognizing there's ebbs and flows in recruiting. There's high times where we see, like right now, I just had a family that reached out and they're like, we're losing momentum. And I said, no, it's September. There's no momentum to be had right now. It's okay. They're competing right now. And so it's going to take a little bit longer for you to get a response right now. And that's okay. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're not interested. So breathe. I think for a parent, knowing that this process is very emotional, it's going to come with a lot of ups and downs, and keeping your composure and being supportive is important. We have to be very realistic with parents and say, this is where your daughter is. This is where she is on a national level. These are the types of programs that she can play for. You're aiming really high right now, and this is part of the problem. You have to you've got to change. These are the conferences. These are the programs. This is the direction that we need to go. I think for the parents is like recognizing when you know that you need to go out and take a walk, and just, if your faith is important to you, saying a little prayer and having some composure. And all the years that I've done this, it works out for a lot of the athletes the way it's supposed to work out. I think as long as you, as a parent, keeping your composure and then helping with the game plan. These kids start the process, and then oftentimes they drop the ball. So they'll start emailing, and then they'll say, well, I don't have any tournaments coming up, or nothing's happening, and we're not in club season right now, so I'm just going to stop communicating. You're trying to build a relationship with these coaches. And so the consistency of your marketing campaign is a really crucial aspect of being successful in the recruiting process. And so as a parent, rolling out the calendar and really looking at, ensuring, if it's your son or daughter that's sending the emails, are they getting them out consistently at a consistent cadence? If you're, involved, for a lot of parents, they're hitting send on the emails. Maybe the athlete is involved in writing the messages, but the parent is hitting send on the emails. So a lot of people are going to go crazy the fact that I even said that, but it's, if you've got a kid that's got 4 or 5 AP classes and you're expecting that they're going to write every single email, it's, for a lot of them, they don't have the time in the day. So they're involved in the development of, the draft, and then the parents hitting send. And so learning how to communicate with, your son or daughter about the process, and making sure that there's a consistency in their email cadence is going to be really important. And asking your son or daughter, how can I support you? What can I do for you? Is there something that I can do to help you? And some kids just don't know how to ask for help or what to ask for. It's one of the reasons that I've been in business for 15 years, right? Is clearly that, there's a need, right? For somebody to just have somebody to talk to. Hey, this is what's happening. What do we do next? Oh, hey, there's a reason for that. This is what's going on. These are your next steps. This is what you need to do. So we find that we talk people off the ledge.
Yeah, I feel like I would say most families don't know how the recruiting process actually works, and the time it takes to what it actually looks like to be recruited and to be in that process. And you're absolutely right. I know a ton of athletes that, are in that process, and they're talking to coaches, and it's like, oh, we're looking between you and another kid. And then they go with the other kid, and it's devastating and it's tough to, like, no, you got to keep on going, right? That wasn't your only option. You have other schools that you were talking to too, and you got to keep on going, and that's not easy. But you talked about a little bit of talking some parents off the ledge, or helping parents be a little bit more realistic with their choices. For the most part, have has most parents taken that well, or or has it been kind of, what, we don't want your services anymore, like we're just gonna, you're wrong, my daughter's actually this good, I'm leaving? Or do you find that most times when they hear that, the parents actually, actually like receive that well?
You run into all sorts of responses. It depends on when they approach us, when
Mm.
they're looking for help. So I'll give you an
Mm.
example. This wrapped up with a kid who got a great deal. She's going to go to Roberts Wesleyan. And this particular player had been going through the recruiting process, had been doing it on her own, started her freshman year. She had been emailing 200 schools. 200
Oh,
schools.
jeez, it's that's amazing.
Yeah. And she was in her junior year. It was late in her junior year when they hired us. They hired us in May of her junior year. She just signed, she just committed, I should say, sorry. She committed at the beginning of September. So she got started with us in May, having been emailing 200 programs and having little to no results. And the first week that we took her on, I gave her, we do her athletic evaluation, we put together her target list. She started emailing schools, and she had 8 phone calls within a week. Within a week. Went from emailing 200 schools to then all of a sudden having 8 phone calls in the first week of working together. That was a pretty big boost in confidence of like, oh, okay, now I understand the difference. I see what's happening here. And so the parents were like, huge relief. I have another kid that we
Oh, I'm
just
sure.
took
I'm
on.
sure that was a massive relief.
Yeah, she's committed now, and the parents are like, "Oh my God!" Like, anybody who wants to talk about recruiting, you tell them to call me, because her name's Brandy Ramsdale. She's happy to take your call and tell you the value of what it was to deal with somebody that knew what they were doing. Um, but yeah, I've got another kid that we took on recently who, same thing, had been going through the process, and it just no, 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 and has gone on a couple of visits and is looking to make a decision here in a couple of weeks as a
Mm.
senior. So it's not too late, and it's never too late. There's always the JUCO option now too, which is so interesting, because in the JUCO world, your eligibility, you get to keep your eligibility.
Dude,
So if,
what's going on with that? Because I remember I was in Dallas with you, and I talked to some of the, you had one of the JUCO coaches down there in Texas, um, and he was telling me about that broke out, and he told me that that's just going to be so massive. A little bit about what you were talking about when we talked about the mid majors and the diamond in the rough and the transfer portal. Like, I can't imagine, man, if those, I play JUCO, like I can't imagine, like, what you're telling me, I have like 2 more years of eligibility. Like
yes,
that's crazy. What
it's
what have you heard about that? What are your thoughts on that?
So I love this. I love that you can go the JUCO route, because I don't believe in settling.
Yeah.
So you might make a compromise, but you're never going to get pressured from us to make a decision or make a commitment if it's not the right fit. As if you're deciding on a school and it's not the right fit, you're going to end up transferring anyway. You're going to quit. You're going to go home. Like, especially in girls volleyball. Boys volleyball is a little different. Boys will tough it out and just deal with it. But girls, we don't do that. When there's too many, you know, checks in the settling category, it ain't happening. You're gonna go home. And so I think, going the JUCO route allows you to, have another, opportunity to grow and develop as a player and not settle. And then you can't just go to any JUCO. I wouldn't go to any JUCO. I would make sure that you're going to a program that is, competing on a national stage. I would track where their kids are committing and where they're going to and what kinds of opportunities are out there. Some community college coaches, I feel, do a much better job with recruiting than others. Um, for our kids, if they go that path, we continue to follow them and then just help them get committed, after they've wrapped up their time at the JUCO. But I think it's a really awesome opportunity for kids to go and to continue to develop. And if they didn't take care of business in the classroom,
Yeah.
you know, scholarships, the way scholarships work, it's academic and athletic scholarship packages that combine to try and get you, in Division I or Division II as close to full as they can possibly get it, right, within their budget. In Division III, there's no athletic scholarship money, and then NAIA works very similar as Division II. They stack scholarships, and Division I at this point. So if you didn't take care of business in the classroom, or you struggled, maybe you got a learning disability, that developed over time, or whatever it is, and you weren't a great student, it gives you a chance to hit the reset button and put yourself in a better place to graduate debt free if that's your goal.
No, I absolutely. That's the route I took. So I played at Limestone, but I was at OCC first, and my grades were not good. I was a knucklehead. But going to Orange Coast College and being with Travis Turner, and I was able to develop, learn, get better grades. And when I eventually transferred to Limestone, unfortunately, the school's not even around anymore. They actually closed their doors not too long ago, back in April. But when I was there, yeah, I had half of it, my tuition was covered academic, and the other half athletic, and which is massive, getting to go play volleyball and pretty much going into it without having to pay almost anything. Like I just paid for my books and my housing, but pretty much
Yeah.
everything else was covered. I think is absolutely massive. And yeah, we're gonna now see a lot of kids, maybe a little bit older, a little bit more mature, and being able to go through this process a little bit better, which I think is absolutely amazing. What are some common mistakes you see parents make that hurt their athletes' chances?
Oh, behavior is a big one. Getting involved, reaching out to the coach, thinking that it's your role to reach out and provide any level of explanation in their recruiting process. If a coach is not requesting to have a conversation with you, please do not take it upon yourself to have a conversation with the coach, because that is a red flag and a half for people.
Yeah.
They don't, you're supposed to be empowering your kids and then handing them off essentially, and they're still kids. Your brain's not fully developed till you're 25, 26 years old. And college coaches are very much aware of this. But at the same point, you've got to be able to let go. Your son or daughter is going to move out, move away, and be on their own and be independent. And so, a coach needs to feel confident that your child's in a place that they're going to be okay to be on their own. And so, how you conduct yourself on the sidelines is always one concern. When we've gone to Vegas and seeing parents, getting completely hammered and fistfights breaking out and things like that happening, not a good look for our sport, but also not a good look for your kid going through the recruiting process. Berating or belittling your kid in a convention center, and your kid breaking down and crying. If your kid is falling apart, have them go into the bathroom and go into the stall by themselves and let them gain some composure and be okay and come out and be okay. You don't really want to be in a convention center where you're crying. It's competitive, right? It's competitive sports. And so, don't try not to be the parent that is getting too overly involved. At the same point, advocating for your kids in the club world is important, but helping them to find their voice and helping them to be assertive and is all important. I promise you that when you're inappropriate with your club coach or your club directors and you're going through your recruiting process, that gets back to college coaches.
Dude, the volleyball world such. Dude, word gets around so fast. Coaches talk. That's just a fact. Coaches talk. Club directors talk. It's yeah. That's a simple fact.
Yeah. I think that's always the big one is, parents when you're heated, you need that cooling off period. You need to take a deep breath and have some composure when trying to handle your frustrations, because it's very unfortunate, and I've seen it negatively impact a lot of kids' careers.
No, I'm sure. Just I don't know if you ever seen that on Instagram, the Ariel Houlihan, where she
Yeah.
goes up to a parent in the middle of it and be like, talking to him about, what, please stop talking to your kid.
Yeah.
What, just to like kind of wrap up, what's one piece of advice you have for parents who are just new to the recruiting process and just new to the recruiting world?
New to the recruiting world, start asking questions. Learn first from your athlete what they're kind of envisioning. Hey, mom or dad, I want to play at the next level. Off, that's awesome. And starting to do, some homework and some research, and kind of figuring out, talk to your club coach. You can always reach out to us. We're happy to have a conversation and help get you off on the right foot. But you need film. You need to be in a place where you're able to get film. So whether your team's using huddle or you're shooting yourself, start organizing and putting your content together so that you can help to put highlights together. And and start doing some initial research. We have a AI platform that's coming out here in the next few months that is going to do a lot of really interesting things. I'm pretty excited about it. You'll start seeing some content and stuff get released, but I have some really cool tools that are going to make the recruiting process improved pretty dramatically here over the course of the next couple months. So I'm excited
Dude, I
about
love
that.
to hear that. Whenever Kara Hill has something coming out, it's going to be big. So, where can people connect with you, Kara? Like website, social, people who want to not only look at your content, because I know you're huge on social media, but also like I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people out there who would love to look at your services and the services you provide, just because of just how much success you've had helping kids get to the next level.
Yeah, so you can reach out on VBall Recruiter. You can go to vballrecruiter.com, and that's our website. So you can check out our website there. On social media, I am VBall Recruiter on Insta, VBall Recruiter 09 on TikTok, and VBall Recruiter on Twitter. Everywhere else, I'm VBall Recruiter. TikTok for some reason, and I started an account so long ago, but. Yeah, that's my
So,
biggest audience. I don't respond to the DMs on TikTok, just a heads up. So if you send me messages on there, I don't always see them. I get a ton of messages, but that's like not a platform that I actually like. I know this sounds really bad, but I have almost 1 million followers on TikTok, and it's
wait,
just gnarly.
what?
So
You have almost a million?
yes. So
That's sick.
Instagram is like the best place, or email my assistant, Derek at vballrecruiter.com, and he will put you on the calendar and chit chat and all that.
Absolutely. I'm sure I'm going to also link all your stuff on this video too. But I just want to say thank you, Kara, for jumping on. You have such invaluable information for parents, coaches, and players that, if they just go back and listen to it, there's so many good things that you brought to us. And I really appreciate you for coming on and just bringing just so much value.
Oh, thank you. It was awesome. It was so good to see you. And thanks for having me. This was really fun.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, until next time, guys, we'll have another episode next week. Till then.